What is up, guys? I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're covering some r/ProRevenge. If you're new here, please consider hitting that like, that subscribe and maybe that notification bell too, as it all really helps out our channel. And a huge thank you to the members of our channel. You are truly appreciated. You'll never know how much, but you really are. And with that being said, let's get in to today's stories. Much love, guys. Our first story comes from Angel Guide Indie. He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Obligatory apology for formatting, as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's, both of us really proud. This is going to be long, so TLDR at the bottom. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sister's ex-boyfriend Paul, ex-boyfriend's new wife Jane, ex-boyfriend's parents Mr. and Mrs. Doe, oldest brother Zeke, our parents and me. When I was 14, my oldest sister Sarah was 22. We found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in, the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, I hope I pronounced that right, which if you don't know is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain, she developed gestational diabetes and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiance, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, your body is built to do this, it can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it, because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she's ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now, and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him to be born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and the baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth. Whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mum and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest Zeke stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labour, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation, discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumour. When I say large, I mean it is twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on the ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumour, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I really didn't pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked Paul why he didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork, as she should have been put for surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates the name, and still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister, And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though that they got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She's willing to do a split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us, until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there was not much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah had been a single mother for the past 6 years, and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife herself. I take her back for a trim and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an arse and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Briantalehe. You know the ones I'm talking about, and Paula suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said, what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name, and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it and stuck by it. I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her, and also to remind him to pay his fucking child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now, with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it stays a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way, as long as he likes it and she doesn't have a problem with it, and she's seeing a new guy who is really great and like a father to Val. What a great story, and what a great way to get revenge as well. At first I thought, oh no, this person's a hairdresser, the woman's going to get a really dodgy haircut or something. But that was a good way of getting revenge, because it wasn't her fault in the end by the sounds of it, and she doesn't know what was going on, so fair play to you for that. What do you guys think about the story? Let me know in the comments below. Our next story is from Reg. Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me. I've never really posted anything before, but I have a funny revenge/karma story that my friends have always enjoyed. I first got to college my freshman year and met my dorm leader, RA at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upper class man that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake name by the way, and at first he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always tried to mention to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we drank in our dorm rooms, but just to keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major, taking some pretty tough classes, and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and had some of the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, haha, just try to keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 PM. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a 0.2, had to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Centre at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset at Julio, who always talked about getting shit-faced freshman year in the dorm. Called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later I see Julio and straight up ask him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responded word for word, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I've never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to the Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest / funniest thing I have ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity group me and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In the meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a shitload of trouble. So I sent that text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year, in my sophomore year, I saw Julio in the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one who ratted him out to Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how shitty his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I looked him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." I don't know if I was saying Judicial Affairs correctly this whole story, you know. I was like, I said it correctly. I did check the pronunciation on Google and it did sound right, so hopefully I did. I can just picture what type of guy though he is, like sucks up to everyone but then stabs everyone in the back behind him. He's a piece of shit, that type of guy. What do you guys think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. Our next story is from Mace Girl. Go back on your word and you might lose the most expensive thing you own. So on December 7th, 2002, I left an abusive husband. Yes, I remember the date exactly, the way an alcoholic remembers their sobriety anniversary. I and my 18-month-old son moved in with my mum, and there was tons of tension in the house from too many people. I had a friend who lived with her mum, who we call entitled friend for now, and she had 2 children by pervy boyfriend. One night I had too much to drink and slept in her out-of-town mum's bed. Woke up to find him in bed with me, trying to get things started. The mum was staying with friends in a state 1,500 miles away, and her car payments were so delinquent the financing company was looking to repossess it. I told them as long as she didn't get in a wreck, ticketed, or towed, the financing company would never be able to find her. She desperately wanted me to move into her side of the duplex, which her dad owned, so she lived rent-free. Her daughter, entitled friend, kept going into the house to do her laundry, ran up the utilities until they got disconnected. Then when mum popped into town, she had all these back utilities and deposits to pay. She also had no cable TV because her daughter and husband had watched so much porn that she owed around $700 to every company that offers cable in our city. When she asked me to move in just to pay the utilities to protect her, with a promise that I'd move out immediately if she came back to town, I readily agreed. Because of pervy boyfriend, I had the mum draw up a lease forbidding him from coming into the house. The mum also wrote in the lease, without my prompting, that entitled friend could visit with my permission. It turned into a nightmare. Entitled friend kept showing up to do laundry unannounced, frequently breaking into the house if I was gone. She let her boyfriend go in the house and he stole my last $20. One day entitled friend saw a pair of Christmas mittens my 3-year-old loved. She had a 3-year-old too, so she said, "Oh, daughter would love those, can I have them?" And she was serious. I explained that they were my son's and that he was still using them, and she was furious that I would be so selfish. The next time my house got broken into for her to do laundry, the mittens disappeared. The final straw was when I came home from a long day at work, only to find the laundry going and my entitled friend was not there. I'd been in the middle of laundry, so I had a load in the dryer that dried before I got home, and I had a load in the washer that should be ready for the dryer. But not this time. Entitled friend had thrown all my clean laundry, not bothering to dry my wet laundry, on top of the pile of lint on the floor, which was right next to the trash can she couldn't be bothered with. She had 2 loads going and 3 large bags sitting in the room. The kicker, she had left me a note that basically said, "Hey, I'm busy, can you finish this up for me?" I called her and tried to tell her that she'd been crossing the line, despite my repeated request that she can do laundry, but not when I was gone. But this was ridiculous. She went off on me about how it was her mum's house and she could do the laundry there whenever she wanted to. Okay, my revenge against her was petty. I stopped the washer and dryer, both loads were still wet, I bagged them and put all her bags on the front porch in freezing temperatures. I had decided to move because this was too much drama, but I called the police so they could simply request that she honour the lease and leave me alone for 2 weeks. I told them I didn't want her arrested, but just wanted the peace and quiet for 2 weeks. They called her on a recorded line, and I could tell what she was saying based off the officer's end of the conversation. "But you moved out 6 months ago, right? Your mum doesn't live there anymore, right? Another person with a lease lives there, right?" He hung up the phone and said, "That was like talking to a 12-year-old on crack." Strangely prophetic, she later became addicted to crack and died of an overdose. Mum was unhappy that I called the police on her daughter, so she called me. I explained my side, told her it was merely a phone call and not pressing charges, but she said, despite the signed lease, "That's my home and that's my daughter and she can come and go as she pleases, and if you don't like that, you can move." Okay, at the time, I was looking at a postcard that had a car financing company had left on the front door. I knew exactly what to do. It takes a lot to make me want to get the revenge, but when I do, it is always completely legal and very bitchy. I called the financing company and gave them her cell phone number, the address and the names of people she was staying with, their home numbers, and all of the info. I had to help them find the car. The mum called me later, pissed, but it wasn't my fault she didn't pay her bills. She disconnected my electricity, which was in her name, so I decided not to pay the last bill, which was almost $300. A 2-bedroom? Really? I moved out and never had anything to do with her again. Summary, I'm new and apologies for getting the right letters. I don't know what the fuck they even stand for. My mum says I can live alone rent free, but daughter wanted me to do her laundry, so I put it wet out in the cold. Mum got angry and didn't keep her word on the lease, so I got her shiny car repossessed. This is one of the main reasons I love ProRevenge. What do you guys think of this story? Don't forget to let me know in the comments below. Once again guys, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you did, don't forget to click that like, subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too. And I will see you in the next one. Take care now. Goodbye.